Hello and welcome to the Amazon Strategist Show, the show that's all strategy, no hacks, no silver bullets, and no magic pills. Just real practical strategies for growing your Amazon business. Today, my guest runs a business called Eagle Alpha, where he aggregates data for hedge funds in New York, London, all over the world, as well as being interested in e-commerce since 1999. So back when e-commerce was literally coming off the ground. So with over a decade leading investment banks at Morgan Stanley and Credit Suisse, Emmett has billions of dollars of corporate experience in M&A across credit, equity, and everything else. Emmett oversees deals for the Fortea Group and advises on those deals. So without any further ado, welcome, Emmett Kilduff.
Thank you, John, for having me. Great to be here.
Well, thanks for being here. So me and Emmett were diving in just before this episode. I asked some questions and he gave me some amazing answers. So well, let's dive in to start with. What does the Fortea Group actually do?
The Fortea Group core focus is to advise e-commerce entrepreneurs on their exits, whether that exit is in the very near term or even 1, 2 to 3 years out. That's our core focus.
Cool. So, say I have a business, I'm doing $1 to $5 million in revenue, and I'm looking to exit in the next couple of years. What would be my approach to you, or what would be your approach to me to start talking about that?
Yeah, I guess the numbers are important, John. So we as a business, we work with companies that have a minimum of $5 million of revenue at the time of sale, and we go all the way up into the hundreds of millions. So if one of your listeners has a business that's on track to get to $5 million revenue in, say, 1 to 2 years, has growing revenue, great net margins above 20% for FBAs, then we're really interested in putting them on with what we call our Exit Ready program, which is designed to prepare them thoughtfully over time to get their business as ready as possible for exit. And there's 3 components to that. There's strategic advice, financial advice, and operational advice. And I love the saying, prepare to fail, fail to prepare. Or fail to prepare, prepare to fail. It's really important to be thinking about your biggest payday event as early as possible. There's a reason why the biggest companies on Wall Street start planning 1 to 2 years out. Why shouldn't e-commerce entrepreneurs start planning 1 to 2 years out, rather than trying to rush into it in a matter of weeks or small number of months?
Yeah, I mean that makes a lot of sense. And so, what type of buyers are you looking at for those over $5 million deals, well, over $5 million revenue companies? So.
Yeah, there's 3 different categories of buyers that we work with. They're all institutional, so they're not individual. I think, below 5 million exit value is more suited towards the individual buyers. From an institutional perspective, so there's 3 categories. The first is aggregators, of which there's both FBA aggregators and DTC aggregators increasingly. The second is private equity, and the third is corporates or strategics. The aggregators will look at businesses that have at least 5 million revenue. Most private equity firms or corporates, it needs to be more in the sort of the $10 million or higher bracket.
And I guess you were talking about these different buyers and operations. Like, what level of operations would this business need to have to be able to exit to one of these different types of buyers? Because a lot of Amazon businesses have very limited operating teams when they decide they want to exit. They've got a couple of VAs, or they might have a head of operations, but usually not in my experience. So what do you help them put in place so they actually can be acquired?
Well, I think in most cases you're right, they're quite lean, and that is reflected in the financials. If there's growing revenue, great net margins, that's a good result. That's one way to answer that question. The other way to answer that question is, look, the best brands in the world ultimately go omni-channel. Well, let me start again. The best brands are brands with a big capital B. They're not products, right? As you know well. So our buyer client base are looking for brands. Then they're looking for brands that have longevity and can go omni-channel, whether it's on across Amazon's, international marketplaces, other marketplaces, Shopify, offline. And obviously, if one can show some progress towards that, that can be helpful to tell the story, to prove that it's a brand as opposed to 100% Amazon business, which might have concentration risk, just specifically on Amazon. If you go back to those 3 work streams in our Exit Ready program, strategic, financial, and operational. So from a strategic perspective, some entrepreneurs we're speaking to are looking to acquire other brands themselves with acquisition finance in order to increase the scale of their business and make it more attractive to buyers, because scale means more buyers, more valuation, higher valuation. From a financial perspective, it's really critical, especially in these markets. I'd be willing to give up some revenue growth in order to have better net margins, better cash. So there's things that you could do to prepare the business to be more net margin focused over a period of time before an exit. From an operational perspective, I'm the corporate finance geek, and thankfully I have a co-founder who's an e-commerce expert. He ran e-commerce at the biggest baby wipe company online, Water Wipes, and he leads that work stream. So he'll work with the founder, the entrepreneur team, to improve their operational metrics over the period of the Exit Ready program.
Well, that's very cool. So I guess how do people start working with you?
First step is to reach out and have an initial introductory call where we can explain more about our background, who we are, what the Exit Ready program entails, our credentials, and then we learn more about the entrepreneur and his or her business, and we can take it from there. Nice. And how do you get compensated? Yeah, so our compensation is all back-ended. It's all ultimately the success fee. There's a small retainer, which is offsettable against the success fee, but it's during the Exit Ready period, it's small. It ramps up when the process starts, and it's offsettable against the final check. Yeah, very cool. Definitely an option for people to start exploring. So you said it should be, what's the best time before somebody wants to exit that they should be starting to talk to you? As soon as possible. Like, we had a webinar last month called Red Flags and Due Diligence, and we had 2 law firms speak, and one of the lawyers in the States has had people who've had IP issues with patents and so forth, and it's taken a year to get it right, and the buyers won't buy until those issues are sorted. So you never know. We've seen all the red flags. We can look under the hood of a business and give all the advice to sort of minimize the risk of a deal falling over or being delayed or it having an impact on valuation. So if it was my business, I'd start at least a year out. And I guess with a magic wand, what kind of multiples are people getting in the market right now? Well, before the correction, let's call it May this year, for Amazon FBA businesses, the typical range was between 3 and 6x SDE, and that's including upfront and deferred compensation. Post the correction, i.e. today, that range has come from 3 to 6x to 2 to 5x. That's please bear in mind that's the typical range. There are exceptions to both the downside and the upside. The downside, there's some very distressed brands that are trading below 2x. If revenue's declining and net margins are below 15%, it's really, really tough to sell, particularly now. But there's also exceptions to the upside. We call them diamonds. And so if revenue's above 5 million, if revenue's growing in this tough market, and net margins are above 20%, you can absolutely get above 5x, including earnout and deferred compensation. Is there any way that you know of, well, I don't know, because obviously nobody knows, but of predicting the future? Because I always feel like whenever I hear anyone talking about market conditions or what's coming, everyone thinks whatever's happening is going to continue forever. Like whatever's happening, whether it's going down, whether it's going up, I feel like either the end of the world or, utopia is coming forever. So with your experience, 20 years experience, like, what do you think? Well, it was pretty scary that on Monday this week, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan, they said that the US is going to go into recession, a deep recession, in 6 to 9 months' time. Europe's already in a recession, and the States will go into a recession in 6 to 9 months' time. He has amazing data from his commercial bank, Chase, in the US. his investment bank, JP Morgan, and the private bank and the asset management side of JP Morgan, right? So he has access to amazing data, so he can see what's coming. So unfortunately, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, based on his analysis. But look, the way from an entrepreneur perspective, the way to think about it is it's hard to know when one should have a baby. There's no perfect time. One's always busy. It's hard to know when one should sell their baby, i.e. their business. It's a lot of personal questions that have to be answered apart from business questions and uncontrollable macro questions. From a personal perspective, is the person maxed out on credit cards? Have they started another brand? Are they just frankly really tired? And are they sort of bored? They're all questions that one should just be honest with and answer. From a business perspective, please try and sell when the going's good, when there's something left on the table for the buyer. It's really tough. It's actually, I'll go further than that. It's impossible to sell a business today where revenue is declining and net margins are below 15% right now. It's just impossible. We've tried, unless you want to settle for 1.5x, which no one does. So ask yourself honest personal questions. Ask yourself, honest business questions from a time perspective. The macro stuff we can't control. I don't, the crystal ball comment. I don't know. I thought during the summer when July the stock market rebounded, I thought things would settle. They look like they're going to get worse. I'm hoping, just from a pure aggregator perspective, 2021 was the year of M&A. 2022 was the year of, oh crikey, let's get our operations in order. And hopefully 2023, most of the big aggregators have got their house in order and will return to the M&A spree. So there might be some more buyers, like the bigger aggregators might come back to market in Q1, Q2, and that might help, supply and demand.
Yeah, that would be really good. So, there's a real newbie question for me. What's a recession mean for everyday people? Our businesses, I see them as, we're little islands. Obviously, market may or may not affect us, but what's a recession mean for us and for the average person?
Well, it means less consumer demand. The inflation is really scary and uncontrollable by the central banks across the world at the moment. The war is affecting supply chains. All of this is leading to a softer consumer, which is a term which means a consumer with less confidence and less money, disposable income. And I think you're seeing that come through in Amazon's prediction for the second Prime Day. They're not as confident as maybe they would have been 6 months ago as to what the impact it could have had. So it means it's going to be tougher to get revenue. I think from a practical management perspective, I think more entrepreneurs are going to have to chase discounts to try and attract customers, and that's a dangerous game in itself. And again, I'm not an operational guy, but there will be a lot of that as we get into Q4, October, November, December. That'll impact net margins, which, bringing back to this conversation, is going to impact the ability to sell a business. I think a lot of entrepreneurs are just putting their heads down now and really concentrating on execution for Q4, and those they might reconsider then an exit as depending on how they come out and what the scorecard is like at the end of Q4, and think about an exit next year.
Yeah, I see that. But I guess coming back to what you were saying, they should be thinking about it now and talking to you now if they're thinking about exiting next year.
Yeah, and we're not going to take up 50-hour weeks. We respect their time, especially in Q4. But it's good to get the ball rolling. We can speak to, for example, their law firm, or introduce one, speak to their accountant, their CPA. We can get the ball rolling on a number of initiatives. We can start learning about their business, getting access to Seller Central, etc., which will ultimately be able to help direct them in the right way.
And are you looking mainly for US-based businesses, or EU, or Oz, or any particular market which is easier for you to sell?
To be honest, the US ones are relatively easier to sell because they're structured as an asset purchase agreement as opposed to selling the company. So it's a simpler transfer. You're not transferring the company and all its liabilities and so forth. But look, we're based here in Europe. The business is global in nature. Our first question is it a strong brand? What's the revenue? What's the revenue growth? And what's the net margins? If those four questions are answered well, I don't really mind where it's from. It means it's a good business. Good businesses get bought, and that's an important phrase, right? The best businesses get bought, not sold. And to that, we're very excited next month to launch the world's first Shark Tank type event for e-commerce brands, where we're going to put 10 brands to give on a webinar to showcase themselves to 50 or 100 buyers. And that goes back to that phrase, like we want the business to start flirting, but get bought by the buyers, as opposed to the more traditional way of always going through a sale process.
No, I like that. I was going to ask you about that. So what kind of buyers have you got lined up for that?
We're marketing that to our entire database of buyers. So aggregators, private equity, corporates, or strategics will. It's the first of its kind. So they're all eager because they love getting an early look on deals that are coming to market, right? And there'll be a huge FOMO because if they're not on it and their competitors are on it, starting to flirt with the brands, they'll feel like they're getting left behind. So from your audience's perspective, we hope to have a big audience. It's a great opportunity to get in front of a lot of buyers in an efficient way.
Oh, very cool. It's interesting market, but yeah, it sounds really cool. Love to see it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess what is your number one piece of advice for founders who are seeking to exit or thinking about exiting in the next 1 to 2 years? Yeah,
the one word is preparation. And we've touched on it a bit, but fail to prepare to fail. Elon Musk wouldn't start the sale process for any of his businesses in 4 weeks' time. And why should anyone else? Chewy, all these big e-commerce exits have been planning for 1 to 2 years. Why shouldn't a small entrepreneur follow the same best practice approach and thinking? What I'm trying to do, I worked at Morgan Stanley, one of the best M&A firms in the world. And what I'm trying to bring is that level of thinking, that approach, that pedigree to the smaller end of M&A and e-commerce brands. And preparation is a big part of that.
So playing devil's advocate, what happens when somebody comes to you and says, I want out like now, you know what I mean? Like they're ready to sell. Because I've met so many small business owners and entrepreneurs who are like, they get sick of the business. And then I talk to them, I'm like, look, you've got this much upside. You just need to take advantage of it. But now they're like, no, I want to sell it.
You want to sell it now instead of wait. We have 22 client engagements at the moment. John, 10 or so want to sell now, 12 is next year or beyond. If someone says they want to sell now, we do more diligence up front to make sure that what they've got is robust. We turn down more companies than we take on because they don't match our standards. Some do, and if they do, we're very happy then to put it straight into an exit process.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Makes a lot of sense. And just because I like clarity on it, and I think our listeners would as well. It's like there's quite a few businesses talk about M&A, and they want to bring M&A into the e-commerce space. What's the definition of M&A? Because apart from outside the M&A industry, I think it's a dark art of what exactly an M&A bank does.
Which is, to be honest, a strange enough term in itself, because pretty much all M&A is an acquisition, not a merger of equals. So really you could drop the M and the and sign and just call it acquisitions. What do we do? Well, we have 7 steps in our exit process that follows what an investment bank does. At the preparatory stage, we understand the business and we have a really detailed questionnaire that buyers have helped us prepared. When that's answered, we turn that into a 2-page teaser, a 50-page confidential information memorandum, and a virtual data room. So that's sort of stage 1 of 7. Stage 2 is marketing, where we invite our database of buyers, aggregators, private equity corporates to come into the data room to review those materials, and if interested, have a one-on-one with the seller, and then consider submitting a bid. Stage 3 then is negotiation of the bids. So we're speaking to all those buyers, understanding their concerns, their thoughts about the asset or the brand, answering all their questions thoughtfully to help encourage them to submit an offer. And then hopefully you get competitive offers where we can then make sure ultimately the whoever we give exclusivity to has a great offer that the seller wants. And there's lots of nuances there. It's people get stuck up on like, what's the sticker price? The devil's in the detail on deals, right? It's how much is deferred? What is it based on? Is the earnout based on revenue or STE? If it's STE, is there any controls there about marketing spend, or can it be manipulated? Two aggregators are getting sued at the moment because they didn't pay earnouts, right? So, and then there's the due diligence stage, which is the most intense stage, where we sit on all the work streams for supply chain due diligence, financial due diligence, and so forth. And there's other stages. They're all documented in our 90-page exit guide for Amazon FBAs for anyone that wants to take a look. But it's a bit like asking maybe what a housing realtor does. They sell your house and they go through the process. Entrepreneurs thinking that they can do all this themselves is just ludicrous. Again, Elon Musk doesn't sell his businesses himself. He hires Morgan Stanley or Goldman Sachs to do it, or JP Morgan, because he recognizes the value advisors give. So look, it's all there in our guide.
So the difference, to repeat back, is M&A is hired by the seller to represent them, as opposed to a broker who sits in the middle.
Some brokers charge the seller, other brokers charge the buyer. In the history of M&A, you're right, John. It's the seller that engages the investment bank.
And they represent your interests?
We represent the seller. Like, we are we're mandated to look after the seller's interests. And there's some instances where investment banks can advise a buyer, like a private equity firm who wants to look at buying a beauty business in Europe, and they might advise them on targets and so on. But the majority of the time, it's the investment bank looks after the seller.
Cool. And then who represents the buyer?
Well, yeah, great question. Typically, like, the aggregators represent themselves. The aggregators have hired a lot of folks like me who've worked at Goldman Sachs or Morgan Stanley, a lot of professional M&A folks, and they have all that experience in-house. Private equity will do a lot of the work in-house and then bring in consultants like a McKinsey, a Bain, a Deloitte, a PwC, to do specific due diligence, as will corporates. But they will lead all those deals, or certainly up until maybe the LOI stage. They'll do a lot of it in-house and then bring in third parties to do confirmatory due diligence. Sorry, I should say for bigger deals, then there'll be an investment bank on the buyer side as well. For deals in the 5 million, 10 million, usually you don't see the buyer having an investment bank. But if it's a $200 million deal, $400 million deal, absolutely, you'd have an investment bank on the other side of the table to the Fortier Group. Cool.
And how would the buyer usually be getting their funds on those kind of deals?
Sure. So the aggregators have raised $15 billion over the last 18, 24 months, a mixture of equity and credit. The equity comes from VCs or private equity firms, and the credit comes from credit specialists. So they have a lot of dry powder. Private equity, they typically raise money from either family offices or pension funds, and they raise funds that they go out and then invest over time. And corporates, it's their own balance sheet.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Yeah, thank you for answering all my questions. I know I asked a lot of newbie stupid questions, so thanks for indulging me.
You're most welcome. No, it's sometimes M&A is thought of as sort of just an elitist thing for big boys on Wall Street, but like the small firms should be applying the same approach. So hopefully that helped demystify it a bit for your audience.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Because I mean, I know many people who've sold to aggregators, to private deals, from any kind of interesting layers of multiples from 2.5 to 6, 7x.
Yeah.
So I always wonder like what multiple they could have got going through someone such as yourself, as opposed to those type of deals. If 10 million come 20 million, then it's great.
Yeah, well, there is statistics on that by the University of Alabama. They studied 3,500 deals over 15 years, and it showed that a good advisor will get you 25% more in the valuation. And that research is in our exit guide that's available on our website. Just like a good advisor will get you a better deal on nearly anything that if you try and do it yourself. I mean, if it's your first rodeo. I've been doing corporate finance for 23 years, so I'm going to get a better deal than anyone who goes to try and do it themselves.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
That's all I do. It's all I do for a living, So if I'm not better at it than someone who comes to it first time, I'll hang up my boots.
Yeah, I get that. All right. Well, thank you so much for answering all the questions, and that takes us into the game section. Where we both play together. So are you excited?
Great. I'm intrigued.
All right. Yeah, me too. All right. So I'm going to launch this up and let's get into the spin the wheel. So this is the part of the show where we have our game where we give back to our listeners. So every time a guest comes on, they bring on 1 prize, 2 prize, 3 prize, whatever comes on, it gets put on the wheel. We spin the wheel, and then on the live show on Fridays, we announce the winners and add more prizes. So Emmett has very kindly put forward a free advisory call on how to best prepare your business for an exit, which is super cool. So thank you, Emmett, for putting that forwards.
No problem.
Also, still on the wheel, we have $400 worth of free reimbursements from our sponsor, ourselves, Seller Candy. We have AI Hello. We have 6 months free account. We have Amazing at Home, listing review. We have a 45-minute call with Canopy. We have a copy of IP Alert software from Clear the Shelf. We have $1,000 worth of bookkeeping credit from Ecom Balance, and a free license of Tariff Buddy from Beardy Norm, who was on a few weeks ago. So many, many cool prizes to win. And when ready, we can spin the wheel. So Emmett, you are in control. All you need to do is say spin the wheel, and it spins.
Spin the wheel.
Oh, wow, can you hear the sound?
Cool. Futuristic.
Futuristic, yeah. All right. And today, our first winner, that makes noise this time. Okay, it's never made noise before. A 6 months free account of AI Hello. So
very good.
Please note that down. That's off the sound. And one more time.
Spin the wheel.
Oh no, I'm clicking the wrong wheel. Wrong screen. And awesome. So $1,000 worth of credit with Ecom Balance. That's really cool. So if you're a small seller, I guess that's like 5 months or so. And if you're a 7-figure seller, a couple of months, from what I understand. I don't highly recommend checking them out. We're testing them at the moment as a bookkeeping partner. So, Emmett, thank you so much for spinning our wheel. All right, so moving on to the final section, we have our rapid fire questions. They're not that difficult. Don't be too scared.
I thought I was done. Oh my God, now the hard part comes.
Now the hard part comes. Rapid fire, just quick answers as possible. Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
There are no correct answers.
Okay.
Apart from the correct answers. So, question 1. Your favorite Amazon niche?
Pets.
If you could choose no pictures or no reviews, which would you pick?
No pictures. You've got to have reviews. Builds them out.
Name a country that starts with the letter F.
France. My favorite country.
Which Amazon marketplace is the next big opportunity?
Not sure. I think the big ones are already there. They're all just going to be somewhat additive, but not huge.
Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Name something appealing about working from home.
Quietness.
Organic sales or ad sales?
Organic.
And finally, name something you'd hate to find swimming around in your bathtub.
A snake.
A snake. Awesome answers. Thank you, Emmett. One final question. We ask every guest, what is one strategic element you think people are missing while selling on Amazon?
I don't think sellers are thoughtful enough in how they are tracking financials and KPIs. Too many sellers we meet are not comfortable talking about financials. They sort of leave it to their CPA, etc. To be good in business, you've got to get a grasp on the numbers. So I would encourage people to spend more time with good accountants or CPAs and learn the art of understanding the numbers deeply and tracking them appropriately.
Oh, great advice. And do you have, in your exit guide, does it have a kind of list of KPIs and different things that sellers should be monitoring?
Yeah, we have a list of all the components that make up evaluation. So, and of which there's many, or there's obvious things that we've touched on, like revenue growth, net margins, but there's lots of other things as well. And there was a long list in the guide there on that topic.
Yeah, so go and download the guide and check out that list. So if anyone wants to get in contact with you, which I'm sure they do, or download the guide, where can they do that?
Please reach out to thefortiagroup.com, FORTIA, which is the Latin for strength. The more brands we sell, the stronger and better we become at doing our job.
Nice. And is there also a link to download the guide there as well?
Absolutely, yes. So we actually have a section dedicated to educating entrepreneurs. And within that, we advertise our monthly webinars on M&A and also the guides. We've published an FBA guide that's on its second edition, and we're also working on a guide for DTC.
Very cool. So yeah, please do go and check out the Fortia Group. Reach out to them through their website and download the guide. Sounds super cool. I'm actually going to download the guide now. And that brings us to the end of our episode. So thank you to Emmett for joining us. Hope that it was beneficial to all of the listeners tonight. And as always, thank you for listening to the Amazon Strategist Show. If you can, please leave us a review anywhere around this. And click the like or subscribe button, depending on what platform you're watching on, whether it's YouTube or Spotify or Facebook. So thanks so much for being here, Emmett, and have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, John. Great talk. Thank you.